Good morning, Gordon. It certainly is a personal delight to speak at this convocation and to see so many familiar faces. Being part of this vibrant community for so many years will always remain one of the highlights of my life. I joined the Gordon community in 1971 and spent most of my teaching and writing in the fields of Old Testament and Christian-Jewish relations. At this morning's convocation, I've been asked to share some of the experiences and lessons I've learned with hundreds of my Gordon students as we have sought to reach out and build friendships with the Jewish community here in the North Shore. Many of the observations I will make in this talk have been shaped by taking nearly 500, believe it or not, off-campus educational field trips with my Gordon classes into various areas of the Jewish community. For far too long, Christians and Jewish communities in America have largely remained strangers to each other. They have been like ships passing in the night, only occasionally having some SOS crisis like fire in a house of worship needed to bring them together briefly for community aid in resolving the problem. Sadly, many Christians and Jews in America tend to live within the relative security of their own respective bubbles. They are essentially comfortable and content by talking to and spending time with others who are just like themselves. My focus this morning will be on how evangelical Jewish relations have changed my life and also changed the perceptions that Jews have of Gordon College. This has happened as each of us has made an effort to move outside our respective bubbles and from there to meet and to seek to build constructive bridges across the divide. Since I have been at Gordon, both our communities have come to a deeper understanding and mutual respect through interfaith dialogue, through cooperative projects, through personal friendships. It is important to emphasize that evangelical Jewish relations has always had its ups and downs and is always a work in progress. Each faith has similarities to the other, but also differences. Respecting those differences and even coming to understand and appreciate some of them has not always been easy. Accordingly, Christian-Jewish relations is somewhat like trying to make a graph of the stock market. Yearly, it has its ups and its downs, but those committed to stay with it over the long term usually discover progress and success for their investment. All Christians must ask themselves, how does ignoring the Jewish community, which is our focus today, by pretending they do not exist, please God or advance the kingdom of God in this world? The New Testament teaches, "Blessed are the peacemakers, and do good unto all people." Why? Our non-Christian neighbors have dignity, they have value, they are worthy of respect, because these neighbors like us have been created in the divine image, and therefore they must not be degraded, dehumanized, or destroyed with hateful words or actions. The North Shore Jewish community has a significant presence in the larger Gordon neighborhood. So it provides the opportunity for students to leave their comfort zone and to build bridges of understanding and friendship with Jewish people. Few freshmen arrive at Gordon having had previous contact with Jewish people. The location of Gordon has some unique advantages that it can offer any inquisitive student, and this is one of them. To be specific, Gordon is not located on some desolate prairie of Texas or in the Badlands of South Dakota, but Gordon sits on the edge of the intellectual and cultural capital of America. This fact is very attractive to the rabbis and Jewish teachers in our area. Jews are passionate about learning, and the very last words of Matthew include the words teaching them as part of that so-called Great Commission. This is part of our Judeo-Christian heritage. Where Jews are so passionate about learning, that is why there is a North Shore Jewish Rabbinic Association. Over the years, Gordon has invited its members multiple times to this campus to speak at or attend special campus events. My first decade at Gordon College, which was 1971 to 81, I spent considerable time exploring the Jewish community and introducing myself and Gordon students to about 15 synagogues and other Jewish organizations nearest to this campus. Today, Gordon students are welcome to visit these places as guests and to listen and learn. Students do not have to come with me, but they must be sincere about listening, learning, and interacting with their hosts. It's always courteous and wise to call in advance to let our Jewish friends know you are coming, how many there will be in your group, and to clarify the time and the details of the event. To build friendships with the Jewish community north of Boston requires intentionality and an effort on your part, but the rewards can be beneficial and life-changing. You will learn about the Torah of Israel. You will learn about synagogue worship. The synagogue in Nazareth was where Jesus kicked off his public ministry. You will learn about Jewish liturgy, Jewish prayer, music, and be welcome to take part in biblically based holiday celebrations, interactive Bible studies, and some cultural events such as Israeli dancing. You will be a deeper, more informed, and effective Christian as a result. Jesus emphasized the two-pronged mega commandment of the Bible derived from the Jewish scriptures. To get that mega commandment, Jesus went back to the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. He underlined the imperative to love the Lord your God with all you've got and to love your neighbor as yourself. How can we as followers of Jesus be self-satisfied and complacent about fulfilling this command of Jesus to love our neighbor when we have never made a sincere effort to reach out to get to know our neighbor? In the Hebrew Bible, the word to know means to experience personally. Knowledge was not primarily something abstract or where you studied from a distance. It meant personal participation in learning. To know another is to engage a person firsthand. When Christian-Jewish dialogue is authentic, it is conducted faith to faith, face to face. Concerning the command for Christians to love their Jewish neighbor, one evangelical scholar has astutely observed, quote, "While we understand that Christians and Jews have theological differences, We do not have to agree on theology in order to love one another. And if we cannot love one another, what good is our theology? That, to me, is an important question worth pondering. Don't lose your place at the dialogue table. The story of your personal journey of faith is important. There are some 25,000 Jewish people in this North Shore community of which we are a part. Yes, most of us are busy with our studies and other activities on campus, but what many Gordon alums have told me over the years is that off-campus learning experiences have proven to be deeply useful, especially learning to be at ease around Jewish people and having experience working with them when opportunities present themselves. Should we not know Jewish people and they know us and the activities and emphases that are essential to a Gordon education? In my view, this should especially be a priority for Gordon because the Christian religion grew out of Judaism. Without Jews in Judaism, there would be no Christianity. We must never forget that for the first 20 years of the church, from roughly AD 29 to 49, a person had to be a Jew or they could not be part of the church. Only later did Paul find a way for Gentiles to join Jews in this Jewish movement, referred to in the New Testament as the Nazarenes. Given our Abrahamic family relationship from Bible times, shouldn't Christians today be concerned about building positive friendships with the Jewish community, a very interesting and diverse group? Just as Christianity is not monolithic, neither is Jews and Judaism and the Jewish community monolithic. But the Jewish community happens to be the largest religious minority in America. And if you want to be able to communicate whatever your vocational goals, you are going to come face to face and need to understand and be able to work with our Jewish friends. When you have your first interview for a full-time position or job after Gordon, what will you have on your resume that points out that your potential boss understands that you have had personal experience working with others of diverse religious and cultural backgrounds? That could be a big plus to help set you apart from so many plain vanilla resumes out there. I'm often asked how I became interested in Christian-Jewish relations. I wish I could tell you I learned this in an evangelical college or seminary I attended. I had some teachers who loved the Jewish scriptures, but none expressed any particular love for the Jewish people who gave us those scriptures. I did not understand this inexplicable disconnect between the book and the people of the book. How could you love one but not the other? In fact, some of my teachers taught the church had replaced Israel, so the Jewish people didn't matter for much anymore. One quoted the historian Toynbee, who said, "The Jew is nothing more than a dried-up fossil, the vestigial remains of a dead civilization." This teaching of so-called supersessionism bothered me, for I teach the Old Testament, and Genesis affirmed God had made an eternal covenant, a Berit Olam, with Abraham and his descendants. And Paul taught to them, namely his Jewish contemporaries, belong the covenants, belong, present tense in the Greek, and that Gentiles are grafted into Israel, God's living olive tree. When I was in my mid-20s, I had an epiphany of sorts. I woke up one morning and realized there was a great paradox I could not fathom. Everything that had changed my life and was of value to me as a Christian came from Jewish people. My Bible, my Lord, my ethics, my understanding of spirituality and social justice, the beauty and power of the Psalms, and belief in a future world of peace that would experience God's universal reign, and much more. All these blessings came from Jews and Jewish sources. Therefore, I was struck with the fact that indebtedness, thankfulness, and appreciation should be the posture of every Christian for these gifts of the Jews. But what did I discover as I began to read deeper into the long history of Christian-Jewish relations? I found things the church never taught me, namely that the attitudes and actions of many so-called Christians toward Jews were often absolutely despicable. It was largely a long history of contempt. I discovered that the rhetoric of many of the church fathers was vile, as Jews were blamed for the death of Jesus and condemned as a people to a life of wandering, suffering, and misery. The long history of Christian contempt for Jews continued with the Crusades, the Inquisition, forced conversions, expulsion from Spain, the tirades of Martin Luther during the Reformation, calling Jews stubborn as the devil, and also that Jews should be driven from Germany for all time. 400 years later, I would point out, Hitler carried out Luther's wishes with horrifying success, as 6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust, while most churchgoers in so-called Christian Europe did little or nothing to intervene. A number of years ago, I was invited by a leading rabbi to hear Billy Graham speak to the Jewish leadership of New England in a Jewish lawyer's office in downtown Boston. Graham and myself were the only two Christians in the room. The words that brought tears to the eyes of many of the Jewish leaders who were present occurred as they heard Graham speak of the sense, with a deep sense of apology and regret, about the deadly silence of the church. And most Christians during the infamous Holocaust years. That is why Graham's organization, you may recall, produced the film The Hiding Place, the story of Corrie ten Boom, the courageous Dutch woman and her family who hid Jews during the Holocaust years. A brave and exceptional act. In 1976, in what is now the Barrington Arts Center on campus, Corrie ten Boom personally told her story of the hiding place at Gordon College during the weekend Richard Gross was inaugurated as president of Gordon College. What I have said so far is a reminder that this long negative history between Christians and Jews still affects Christian-Jewish relations. While important strides toward healing have been made by position papers and documents produced both by Catholics and Protestant denominations, a lot of work remains to be done. Just witness the rise of anti-Semitism in the world today. Weekly, you read in the paper and you see on television, Jews are just not safe. Respect and trust for one another has to be earned. It can't be demanded. Trust develops gradually through human encounter and working together. If there are Jews today living on the North Shore who are suspicious of Christians, it is important we understand why. Many Jews today do not want to hear mere talk from Christians unless they are sensitive and informed about the history of anti-Semitism and how Jews living in Israel today are not even safe in their ancient homeland, where rockets and bombs continue to fall to this day. Thus, Jews want to know a Christian's heart and where that person is coming from and what motivates that Christian to want to befriend Jews. Talk can be well-meaning, as we all know, but sometimes cheap. Thus, Jews are interested in what Christians and Jews might do together to help build the just and righteous world the biblical prophets dreamed about. Surrounded by Jewish neighbors here on the North Shore, why are positive Jewish-Christian relations important for the entire Gordon community? Let me give you briefly a few reasons. First, it allows Christians to seek to right an ugly historic wrong, namely the long history of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. Though not frequently outwardly expressed, inwardly, many Jews think to themselves, here our ancestors were in so-called Christian Europe, and yet Christians behaved badly. Can I trust the Christians who live in my neighborhood today? And while there are Jews who get the impression that the New Testament must be anti-Semitic because Christians who read the New Testament seem to make connections between that and anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. Personally, I do not think the New Testament is anti-Semitic. And I don't think you can draw a straight line from the New Testament to Auschwitz. But sadly, the New Testament has been used against Jewish people through the misinterpretation of texts. Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's an issue where all people of goodwill are called to speak out against evil. How proud I was to see one of my students a number of decades back when a synagogue in Beverly, Massachusetts had vicious anti-Semitic graffiti written on the side of the building. That student had the guts to call a press conference. Television crews from Boston and other media came and watched as those rollers rolled over that graffiti. And Christians took a stand with Jewish people and said, "Not in our town." Secondly, I would point out Jews are valuable assets in helping Christians understand the Jewish roots of the Christian faith. A good number of you have had courses with me, and you know how important a theme that is in my teaching. Jews study the Bible dialectically or Socratically, with back and forth questioning of the text and each other, using an abundance of commentary, never totally satisfied that the job is done. It's never exhausted. And while sometimes we as Christians are looking for one answer and one official interpretation that will please our denomination, denominational biases or the view of key theologians often limit full exploration of what a text says and means. One of the exciting things many Gordon students are able to do is to take part in a dynamic Jewish Bible study where they themselves may contribute to the typically lively discussion of Scripture. Third, Jewish-Christian dialogues are also important in eliminating mutual stereotypes, caricatures, and misperceptions that we have one for the other. It is here we often find either group may be violating the ninth commandment. Now, I won't test all of you that I had in Bible 101 what the ninth commandment is. But you know, we can be guilty of violating that commandment, which says you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, by making statements about our neighbor that are not accurate. Do we know the other well enough to tell the truth about them and what they believe? There's often a danger in half-truths and certainly in outright lies about the other based on ignorance or otherwise. Dialogue helps to eliminate misperceptions. What misperceptions? Here are a few brief examples of what I'm talking about that I have encountered, and there are lots of them. Many Jews think Christians are polytheists. They worship three gods. Historic Orthodox Christianity teaches that monotheism is biblical, and Christians indeed are monotheists, believing in one true and living God. We are not tritheists. And while Father, Son, and Holy Spirit may be difficult to Jewish ears to understand how those words can be co-eternal and co-equal, yet at the same time, take your stand. You are a monotheist. Both Christians and Jews believe in one God. Another misperception Jews often have is to refer to any Gentile or non-Jewish person as a Christian. A Jew may say, my Christian neighbor up the street is putting up a fence, and not knowing whether that Gentile or non-Jew up the street putting up the fence is actually a Christian. So it comes out, my Christian neighbor. Why the confusion? According to halakha, which is Jewish law, one becomes a Jew by birth. But you and I know in our studies of Christianity that one becomes a Christian through faith and not by birth. There are millions of non-Jews who make no Christian profession, and yet they may be referred to as Christians by our Jewish friends. Here's a good opportunity for you to help clarify the difference between the two terms. Another misperception is that Christians sometimes refer to Jews as a race. Jews are not a race because there are numerous converts to Judaism. You can be born of a Jewish mother and be Jewish, or be a Jew by choice or by conversion. And there are tens of thousands of black Jews in New York City and in several key cities in Israel today. Many of them come from Ethiopia. There are Chinese Jews. There are Swedish Jews. Judaism is not a race, and a Jew will call you every time if you use that term, race, for the Jewish people. We need to clarify our vocabulary we use one for the other, and dialogue helps us do that. Another error Christians have made is, as one well-meaning youth director on Long Island did a number of years back, he picks up the phone, calls the rabbi, the synagogue up the street, and says, Rabbi, we'd like to come for a visit. But wanted to clarify, what time are the animal sacrifices going on? Don't want to miss them. I have an announcement to make. There have been no sacrifices since 70 AD, since the temple in Jerusalem and the priesthood ceased. And so we don't always look too smart when we make statements that show we may be quite articulate in our knowledge of the Jewish people for the first 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus. But from Jesus into the modern world, Judaism has evolved through rabbinic Judaism and into its modern expressions. Fourthly, another benefit that comes in interacting with our Jewish neighbors is the opportunity to display and to receive radical hospitality. There are a number of synagogues here in the North Shore that understand radical hospitalities. And I think there are some lessons here for churches in America. After nearly 2,000 years of estrangement, today we have the joyful opportunity to receive and welcome the other into our communities and allow them to define themselves and to share in the activity or program. A few examples, and this is another lecture itself just for examples, but let me give you a few examples. At least 30 Gordon students have worked as interns at the North Shore Holocaust Center and built close relations with Holocaust survivors there. Several synagogues on the North Shore, after the morning service, typically welcome Gordon students to a delicious, free, kosher luncheon. Jesus ate kosher and the 12 apostles ate kosher. They were Jews and they followed Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. You can learn something about 2 chapters in the Bible. And Gordon students typically sit at tables with Jewish congregants. Sometimes we eat together in a sukkah during the Feast of Tabernacles. Some rabbis occasionally cancel their sermons when Gordon visitors join their service. Instead of a sermon, the rabbi will often give Gordon students the freedom to ask questions about the service or about Judaism. This has happened a number of times when I have taken groups of Gordon students. One Gordon College graduate who was pastoring on the North Shore decided to have a guest Jewish speaker on Sunday morning instead of the usual sermon. The rabbi came to the Baptist church, which is a very short bike ride from this campus, and he showed up with 20 of his Jewish congregants. How would your church handle, how would your pastor handle a rabbi and 20 Jewish people coming in for the service, would you know what to do? The rabbi came to the pulpit that day. Polly and I were there. We had many Jewish friends, as well as a few from the church we knew. And the rabbi preached on the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, showing how every phrase in the Lord's Prayer comes into Christianity from Judaism and its pre-Christian liturgy. A lunch with radical hospitality followed the service. Annually, Gordon students are able to carry heavy Hebrew Torah scrolls and to dance with them too, in order to celebrate Simchat Torah, which is the holiday rejoicing in the giving of the scriptures at Mount Sinai. Jews teach the Torah is not owned by Jews. It's God's gift to the world. They were simply the community conduit through whom God gave those holy scriptures. It is the foundation, namely the Torah, of Judeo-Christian religion. Thus, Christians are welcome to celebrate God's gift of Scripture together with Jews. At Gordon over the years, we have had many Jewish speakers. We've held a 4-week convocation series right here on this stage titled Exploring Psalms with the Rabbis. Many Jews have been guest speakers in classes and in Gordon lecture series and faculty forums. As for myself, I have been invited to preach, teach, or lecture in most every synagogue north of Boston. This is not a one-way street. It's an opportunity to share as you build trust and friendships. And Orthodox, Hasidic, conservative, Reform houses of worship have been open to Gordon students, and I have been invited in all of those to speak. Jews especially want to know more about Christians and their perspectives on Scripture, theology, history, and various social issues confronting our times. I am thankful for the presidents of Gordon College who have encouraged evangelical Jewish relations. Dr. Gross, Dr. Karlberg, and Dr. Lindsay have been very supportive in this regard. For example, our college administration has supported such events as co-sponsoring 2 national 3-day conferences of evangelicals and Jews on this campus. Further, the President's Home has held an evening of hospitality so that Jewish professionals and business people on the North Shore could find out more about Gordon College and its programs and people. The largest Jewish event held on this campus was a reception in Lane for 300 Jewish people who had come to campus to see the premiere showing of our 2-hour public television documentary, Jews and Christians, A Journey of Faith. The documentary featured the Gordon College Choir, several local rabbis, Gordon professors, and a number of North Shore pastors and Gordon people from local churches. In closing, I have only touched the surface on ways in which Gordon students for decades have interacted with and built positive friendships with the Jewish community of the North Shore. Before you graduate, I hope many of you will take advantage of this wonderful educational opportunity to enrich your Gordon experience. The synagogues are open to you, and you will be warmly welcomed. Here is an opportunity for personal growth that will allow you to look at the Bible and the people of the book with a fresh set of eyes. Remember, to know is to experience. When you know someone different from you, it helps build true understanding and a more caring, compassionate, and loving world. Is that not what the Gordon experience is all about? Thank you very much.